Are you ambitious but find yourself struggling with laziness? You're not alone. In this video, we're breaking down exactly how you can channel that ambitious energy without feeling overwhelmed. Whether you've been procrastinating on your goals or just need a push to get started, stick around. By the end, as you'll discover practical tips and rules that make productivity feel effortless. Let's get started. Number 1. Use the 2-minute rule for quick tasks. Alright, let's talk about the 2-minute rule. This one's pretty simple on the surface but has the potential to completely transform how you handle all those little things that tend to pile up. You know what I mean, those tiny tasks that take up mental space but never seem to get done. The trick here is to flip your thinking on them. Instead of letting them linger, the 2-minute rule says if something can be done in 2 minutes or less, do it right now. Sounds easy, right? But here's the thing, most of us underestimate just how much these small tasks add up. You think, I'll do that later, but later turns into never, or worse, it turns into a mountain of small things that suddenly feels like too much. It's like this sneaky backlog that builds up in the background without you even realizing it. The beauty of the 2-minute rule is that it stops the pileup before it even starts. You take care of stuff in real time, and it never has the chance to haunt you. Now, when you hear 2 minutes, it might sound ridiculously short. What can you even accomplish in 2 minutes? But the truth is, quite a lot. Responding to a quick email, sending a text, jotting down a note, or putting that dirty dish in the sink, these are the kind of tasks we push aside because they seem too small to matter. But when you think about it, small things can actually clog up your productivity in a major way. They take up mental energy, whether you're aware of it or not. So if you can knock them out in 2 minutes or less, why not just get them out of the way? Here's where the magic happens. Once you start practicing the 2-minute rule, it actually has this ripple effect. When you handle these small tasks as they come, you get a little burst of satisfaction. A tiny win, but a win nonetheless. And that momentum? It starts to build. The more you do it, the more you realize how much smoother your day flows. Plus, these little bits of productivity start trickling into other areas of your life. Suddenly, that bigger task you've been avoiding doesn't seem quite as overwhelming because you're used to the habit of handling things right when they appear. There's also a bit of psychology behind this. Your brain loves finishing things. That little hit of dopamine you get from checking something off your list? It feels good. So, the more you apply the 2-minute rule, the more you're training your brain to associate quick action with reward. And once your brain starts craving that reward, it's much easier to stay on top of things. But here's a key point, don't overthink it. The moment you start debating whether something falls under the 2-minute rule is the moment you lose the benefit. Keep it simple. If you even suspect it can be done in 2 minutes, just dive in. No hesitation, no mental back and forth. In the end, the 2-minute rule isn't just about getting stuff done. It's about creating a mindset where you're not weighed down by the little things. You free up mental space, which leaves you feeling lighter, more in control, and oddly enough, more ambitious without that overwhelming stress that tends to creep in. All by focusing on what can be done in the here and now, with zero procrastination. Number 2, embrace the 80-20 rule in both work and rest. Let's talk about the 80-20 rule. Maybe you've heard it called the Pareto principle, but let's leave the fancy names aside for now and break this down into something you can actually use. Whether it's in your work or your rest, the idea is super simple. 80% of your results usually come from just 20% of your efforts. So why not use that to your advantage? You don't need to go full throttle on everything to make a difference, especially if you're someone who craves achievement but also has a bit of that laid-back, lazy streak in you. So, how does this rule actually work in real life? Here's the trick, you don't need to pour your energy into everything. If you're spending hours tweaking things that barely move the needle, you're wasting precious time. It's about picking the few things that will give you the biggest return, focusing hard on those, and letting the small stuff slide, because let's be real, no one can give 100% all the time. That's exhausting and, frankly, kind of overrated. Instead of trying to do it all, ask yourself, what are the key things I need to do to make the most progress? What can I work on for just a short burst that will really push things forward? Here's where the 80-20 rule gets interesting, because it's not just about working smarter, it's about resting smarter, too. People usually think productivity is all about doing more, but that's only half the game. The other half? Knowing when to stop. When you take a break, don't just zone out for the sake of it. Rest in a way that actually recharges you. That 20% of quality downtime can give you 80% of your energy back. It's like hacking your own relaxation. Maybe a 15-minute power nap is enough to reboot your brain, while mindlessly scrolling for hours makes you feel more drained. So, it's not about being lazy, it's about being strategic. You can rest without guilt if you know you're resting in a way that helps you bounce back stronger. Balancing ambition with laziness might sound like an oxymoron, but it's totally possible once you figure out your sweet spot. Picture it like this: instead of running a marathon at full speed, you're sprinting for short bursts. You'll get to the finish line faster and with a lot less effort, leaving time to chill in between. It's about learning to optimize your energy, to stretch that minimal effort for maximum results, both in work and in rest. You'll feel more satisfied because you're doing the important stuff well and not stressing about the rest. Think of this whole 80-20 thing as your permission slip to stop overcomplicating everything. There's freedom in realizing you don't need to be constantly productive to be successful. In fact, by applying this principle, you're working with your natural tendencies instead of fighting against them. So, embrace the laziness, just make sure it's the intentional kind. When you zoom in on the things that matter and recharge in a way that fuels your ambition, you'll find that sweet spot where you're doing less but achieving more. Number 3, limit distractions and multitasking. Let's talk about distractions and multitasking, the sneaky enemies of productivity. They might seem harmless, maybe even helpful at times, but here's the deal: they're messing with your focus in ways you might not even realize. It's like trying to pour water into a cup while waving your arms around. Sure, some water might land in the cup, but most of it spills everywhere. The end result? A mess, and very little progress. Distractions are everywhere these days. It's not just about that constant buzzing phone, though that certainly doesn't help. It's also those little things we don't notice at first: random thoughts, emails popping up, even the environment around us. You sit down to work, and suddenly, everything seems more interesting than what you're supposed to be doing. The pile of laundry looks inviting. The YouTube tab promising a 5-minute video that somehow turns into an hour-long binge. What's the harm, right? Well, the problem is that each time you give into one of these distractions, your brain has to reset itself. There's a cost to switching gears, and it's higher than you might think. You're not just losing a few seconds to check your messages or scroll through a social media feed, you're also draining your energy and focus. You might think, I can handle it. Multitasking is my superpower. But here's the catch: multitasking doesn't work the way we think it does. When you multitask, you're not really doing multiple things at once. Your brain is actually bouncing back and forth between tasks. And every time it switches, it gets a little slower, a little more tired. Imagine a car constantly stopping and starting. Eventually, the engine wears out. That's your brain when you're juggling too many things at once. You think you're saving time, but in reality, you're stretching out tasks and making mistakes you wouldn't if you gave each one your full attention. The truth is, multitasking makes us feel busy, but it rarely makes us productive. It creates the illusion that we're doing a lot, when in fact, we're barely scratching the surface of what we could accomplish. You're typing an email while half listening to a podcast, and suddenly, you realize neither is really getting your full focus. You have to go back, reread the email, rewind the podcast. It's like taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So, what's the solution? Well, it starts with being honest about what's pulling you off track. You don't have to eliminate every distraction forever, that's unrealistic. But you can create pockets of time where distractions are minimized, where you're giving one task your all. Turn off notifications for a bit, close unnecessary tabs, and make a deal with yourself. For the next 30 minutes, I'm focusing on just this one thing. You might be amazed at how much faster and better you can work when your brain isn't constantly switching lanes. And if you're someone who finds focus hard, start small. Set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes. Give yourself permission to be fully engaged for just that short amount of time. You'll probably find that once you get into it, you can go longer. It's like easing into cold water, you just need to take the plunge, and before you know it, you're swimming. No distractions, no multitasking. Just flow. The more you practice limiting distractions and avoiding multitasking, the easier it gets. You'll start to see the benefits: less stress, more creativity, and, most importantly, more actual progress. Because, let's face it, the goal isn't to feel busy. It's to get things done. Number 4, break large tasks into manageable chunks. Alright, let's get real for a second. We've all been there, staring down a huge task, feeling completely paralyzed. It's like this giant looming cloud that hovers over you, getting heavier and more intimidating the longer you let it sit. You know it needs to get done, and you probably even want to get it done, but the size of it? Ugh, overwhelming. And honestly, that's enough to make anyone feel lazy, even if you've got the best intentions in the world. So, what do you do when faced with a massive, overwhelming task? You break it down into manageable chunks. That's it. Simple, right? But it's not just about chopping up a big job into smaller pieces. It's about tricking your brain a little, turning what seems impossible into something so small, so bite-sized, that it feels doable. Here's the thing, your brain hates big, undefined goals. They feel vague, uncertain, and honestly kind of scary. But small tasks? Your brain loves those. It sees a small task, and it says, yeah, I can handle that. It's a psychological trick, really. When you break down something big into little, manageable steps, suddenly, you don't feel so stuck. And the best part? You start building momentum, bit by bit, without even realizing it. Let's talk about how this works. First, you need to take that massive task and figure out all the moving parts. What needs to happen first? What are the smaller things that, when combined, complete the larger picture? Break it all the way down. The smaller, the better. If something still feels too big, you're not done breaking it down yet. Think of it like this: the goal is to make each chunk so easy, it almost feels like you could knock it out without even thinking about it. And don't just stop at breaking things down. Give yourself little rewards along the way. Finished a chunk? Awesome. Take a breather, grab a snack, check your phone. Whatever makes you feel like you've earned it. These tiny rewards help keep you motivated because, let's face it, motivation can be fleeting when a big task is looming overhead. But when you reward yourself for completing the small stuff, you create a feedback loop. You feel good about getting things done, so you're more likely to keep going. There's also something to be said about the sense of control that comes with this approach. Large tasks can make you feel like you're at their mercy, but when you break them into chunks, suddenly, you're the one in control. You get to decide what happens next, and that alone can make a big difference in how you approach the task. It's empowering, honestly. You're not battling this huge beast of a project anymore, you're calmly handling one small thing at a time. Let's also acknowledge that energy fluctuates. Sometimes you're feeling sharp, ready to tackle the bigger chunks. Other times, you're tired, distracted, maybe even a little bit lazy. That's okay. When you've broken things down, you've got options. Not feeling up to a big step? No problem, tackle a smaller one. It all adds up in the end. So, the next time you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, remember, it's not about doing the whole thing at once. It's about finding that first, small, manageable piece and starting there. Because once you start moving, no matter how tiny the steps, you'll be surprised at how quickly you start making real progress. That's how you outsmart the laziness. Little by little, chunk by chunk. Number 5, leverage automation and delegation. Let's face it, if you're ambitious but lazy, the idea of grinding through every little task is probably not your vibe. You want the big wins, but the tedious, repetitive stuff? Not so much. That's where the magic of automation and delegation comes in. These are your secret weapons. Seriously, you can get so much done without actually doing it all yourself, and that's the goal, right? First, let's talk about automation. We live in a world where technology can do so much of the heavy lifting for us. You've probably got access to tools that can handle things faster, more efficiently, and with way less effort than you ever could. Whether it's setting up automatic responses, reminders, or systems that streamline your workflow, automation is like having your own personal assistant who works 24/7. The best part? You don't have to pay them, and they never ask for a break. But here's the key with automation, you've got to be intentional about it. Don't go automating things just for the sake of it. That's how you end up with systems that don't make sense or that cause more stress than they're worth. Instead, think about the tasks that suck up your time but don't really need your hands-on attention. Can you set up an automatic process to handle them? Perfect. Get that in place, and suddenly, you're doing less, but getting the same, if not better, results. Then there's delegation, which is a whole other superpower. If automation is your silent partner, delegation is more like building your dream team. You don't have to do everything yourself. In fact, you shouldn't. That's not laziness, that's smart. Delegation isn't about dumping your work on someone else, it's about recognizing that other people are probably better at certain things than you are. And guess what? That frees you up to focus on the stuff you're actually good at, the things that move the needle on your ambitions. When you delegate, you're not saying, "I don't want to do this because I'm lazy." You're saying, "I have bigger things to focus on." And that's the truth. It's about playing to your strengths while letting others handle the things that don't light you up. Plus, people love to feel useful, so you're actually giving someone else the opportunity to shine. Win-win. The trick to both automation and delegation is to find that balance where you can let go of the tasks that don't really need you, while still keeping control of the things that do. It's not about abandoning responsibility. You're still the captain of the ship, but you've got an awesome crew, or a killer autopilot system, helping steer it. What's even better is the mental space this creates. When you've delegated the busy work and automated the routine tasks, your brain is free to focus on the bigger picture. You get to spend more time dreaming, strategizing, and chasing the ambitious goals that really matter to you. You're not bogged down by every tiny detail, and that's a huge game changer. So if you're someone who's both ambitious and lazy, automation and delegation are like the ultimate cheat codes. They let you do more by doing less. That's not a contradiction, it's efficiency. You can hit your goals without getting caught up in the weeds, and let's be real, you're probably not into weeding anyway. Why pull weeds when you can plant seeds and watch them grow? That's the lazy person's secret to success. Number 6, reward yourself for completing tasks. Let's be real, sometimes, getting things done feels like pulling teeth. You know what you should do, but that doesn't make it any easier. This is where rewarding yourself comes in. It's like tricking your brain into thinking, hey, if I finish this, I'll get something good. And guess what? It works. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, okay, but I'm not a kid, I don't need a gold star, hear me out. Rewards aren't just for kids, they're for humans. We're wired to chase after things that make us feel good. Whether it's a snack, a break, or just that satisfying feeling of closing a to-do list, rewards can be a game changer when it comes to pushing through those lazy, sluggish moments. Think of your brain like a puppy. Stay with me here. Puppies need to be trained. You don't get them to sit by yelling sit over and over again, right? You've got to throw them a bone when they do it right. Otherwise, they'll just stare at you and probably keep bouncing around like nothing happened. Your brain is kind of the same. It responds way better to positive reinforcement than to guilt or pressure. So, why not make finishing tasks a little more enjoyable? Let's say you've got something you really don't want to do. Maybe it's boring, or just daunting. Whatever it is, pair it with a reward. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. In fact, it shouldn't be. You want rewards that are simple, easy, and directly tied to the task. Like, if I finish this thing in the next hour, I'm going to take a 10-minute break and just chill. Boom. You've just set up a little incentive for yourself. But here's where it gets interesting. The more often you reward yourself, the more your brain starts to associate completing tasks with that feel-good hit. It becomes a cycle: do the thing, get the reward, feel good, repeat. Slowly but surely, you'll find yourself actually wanting to finish tasks because you know there's something enjoyable on the other side of it. What's important is that you actually follow through on the reward. You can't say, I'll reward myself with a break, and then keep working. Your brain will catch on, and soon enough, it'll stop caring about your promises. It's like telling that puppy it'll get a treat for sitting, but then never giving it the treat. Eventually, it'll stop sitting altogether. Another thing to remember is to scale your rewards based on the task. Knocked out a big project that you've been dreading for days? That deserves something a little more special. Finished a quick 10-minute task? Maybe just a stretch or a sip of your favorite drink. The key is to keep the reward proportional to the effort so it doesn't lose its magic. Here's a fun trick: stack your rewards for bigger motivation. Have a couple of things you need to get done? Create a reward system that builds as you complete more. After task 1, a quick break. After task 2, maybe you get a snack. Finish the whole list? Now you're talking. Time for something even better. And don't underestimate the power of the reward being as simple as the relief of finishing. Sometimes the reward is just knowing you did it, and you can finally relax. That's pretty satisfying in itself, right? But if that's not enough, there's no shame in sweetening the deal with a little something extra. At the end of the day, rewarding yourself is all about making the process of getting things done more enjoyable. You're ambitious, but maybe you don't always feel like pushing through. That's okay. Rewarding yourself isn't about bribing yourself into working. It's about creating a positive feedback loop where you associate success with feeling good. Because who doesn't want to feel good, right? So go ahead, set those mini goals, and don't forget to reward yourself when you knock them out. You've earned it. Number 7, embrace the power of good enough. Let's be honest, perfectionism is a trap. It's this sneaky little voice that convinces you that unless something is flawless, it's not worth doing. But here's the truth: striving for perfection? It's exhausting. And not just mentally, but physically too. It drains your energy, leaves you stuck in analysis paralysis, and eventually leads to getting absolutely nothing done. The solution? Embrace the power of good enough. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you should settle for mediocrity or stop caring about quality. What I'm saying is that sometimes, aiming for good enough is actually the smartest move you can make. It frees you. It gets you out of your head and into action. Good enough means progress. It means things are moving, not stalling. When you're ambitious but also, let's say, not always brimming with motivation, good enough is your secret weapon. You don't need to burn yourself out trying to make everything immaculate. You just need to keep things moving forward, even if it's not the most polished or perfect outcome. Think about it. When has the pursuit of perfection ever done anything but slow you down? Here's the funny part. Most of the time, no one else is even going to notice the difference between something that's perfect and something that's simply done. Half of the pressure to make things perfect? It's self-imposed. You've got this internal critic that's way harsher than anyone else would ever be. People appreciate completion, not the hours you spent agonizing over tiny details. And once you start accepting that good enough is actually good enough, you start feeling lighter. More free. You'll start taking on more because suddenly, everything doesn't seem so massive. Let's talk about how this plays out in real life. You've got a task in front of you, and there's that temptation to keep tweaking it, refining every little aspect. But stop for a second and ask yourself, is this extra work really going to add significant value? Or is it just about scratching that itch for perfection? 9 times out of 10, the answer is, nope, it's not worth it. The extra 10%, the tiny details that you're obsessing over, they don't move the needle as much as you think. When you embrace good enough, you're also embracing efficiency. You're cutting out the fluff, getting to the point, and moving on to the next thing. And here's a cool little side effect, you actually start getting more done. More tasks finished. More projects off the ground. Because you're not constantly getting bogged down by trying to make every little thing pristine. You're done, it's good enough, and now you're on to the next thing. And let's not forget the mental freedom that comes with this mindset. There's this sense of relief when you realize you don't have to make everything perfect. You start to let go of all that unnecessary pressure you've been piling on yourself. You begin to feel more confident that what you're doing is enough. It might not be flawless, but it's done. And done is always better than perfect. In the end, embracing good enough isn't about lowering your standards. It's about being realistic. It's about focusing on what really matters and letting the rest go. It's about finding balance, working smarter, and recognizing that sometimes, good enough is more than enough. Number 8. Use productive procrastination to make small progress. Let's talk about something you might already be really good at, procrastination. Now, hear me out, because I'm not here to shame you for putting things off. In fact, if you play your cards right, procrastination can actually work in your favor. It's all about shifting your mindset from feeling guilty about not doing the thing to doing something else that's still productive. Enter productive procrastination. Yeah, it sounds a little contradictory, but stay with me. Productive procrastination is a sneaky way to make progress without feeling like you're grinding away at the big, scary task that's looming over you. It's when you tell yourself, okay, I'm not ready to tackle that huge project right now, but what can I do that's small and still useful? It's not about avoiding work, it's about nudging yourself into doing different work. This way, you're still moving the needle, just not on the thing you're avoiding. And guess what? That's totally fine. Let's be real, getting started is often the hardest part. The bigger the task, the more you want to run in the opposite direction. It's like staring up at a mountain and thinking, there's no way I'm climbing that right now. But productive procrastination lets you hike the little hills first. Those small tasks, like organizing your thoughts, outlining a plan, or even cleaning up your workspace, can help ease you into the bigger challenge without actually diving in head first. You're tricking your brain into thinking, look, I'm still being productive. And slowly, momentum builds. Here's the beauty of it, small progress adds up. Those little things you do while you're avoiding the main thing, they create a foundation. Before you know it, the big task doesn't seem so overwhelming anymore because you've chipped away at all the smaller pieces around it. Maybe you've sorted out your priorities, or you've done some low-level prep work that makes the main event feel a little less daunting. It's like circling the task, getting closer and closer, until eventually, you can't avoid it, and by then, it doesn't feel so terrifying. Another cool thing about productive procrastination? It relieves the pressure. Instead of sitting there stressing about what you should be doing and spiraling into inaction, you're still being useful. You're giving yourself permission to procrastinate, but with purpose. You don't have to feel guilty because, hey, you're still getting things done. Just not in the most direct way. But progress is progress, right? And here's where it gets even sneakier. Sometimes, while you're in the middle of these small tasks, you'll suddenly feel a surge of motivation for the bigger one. It's weird how it works, but by taking the pressure off yourself to get that massive task done right away, you free up mental space. Next thing you know, you're halfway through that daunting project without even realizing it. You got there by accident. So, instead of forcing yourself into an all-or-nothing mindset, use productive procrastination to soften the blow. You don't have to tackle the world today. You don't even have to tackle your biggest goal. Just do something that's useful. That small bit of progress might not feel like much in the moment, but over time, it adds up. You'll realize that even in your procrastination, you're still moving forward, and that's what matters. In the end, productive procrastination is like a back door into progress. It lets you be lazy in a smart way. You don't have to go full steam ahead all the time, you just have to keep inching forward, even if it's sideways. And trust me, those tiny steps, they'll get you to where you want to be. Number 9, schedule regular do-nothing time for creativity. Alright, let's talk about the magic of doing nothing. And no, I don't mean that lazy, scrolling on your phone while feeling guilty kind of nothing. I'm talking about intentional, purposeful do-nothing time. You might think it sounds counterproductive, especially if you're ambitious and always feeling like you should be doing something. But here's the thing, making time to do nothing might be the very thing that unlocks your creativity and boosts your productivity in ways you never imagined. Let's face it, our brains are overstimulated. We're constantly bombarded by information, to-do lists, notifications, and just the everyday noise of life. It's like having 50 tabs open in your brain's browser. There's no space for fresh ideas, no room for creative thinking to thrive. That's why you need to deliberately schedule time to do absolutely nothing. Not as a reward for finishing your tasks, but as an actual part of your routine. It's about creating mental breathing room. Now, when I say do nothing, I don't mean zoning out in front of the TV or endlessly refreshing social media. That's just swapping one form of noise for another. The kind of nothing we're talking about here is more like sitting with your thoughts, allowing your mind to wander without an agenda. It's that moment when you're not actively forcing yourself to be productive, but you're giving your brain the freedom to relax, roam, and, surprisingly, create. You see, creativity thrives in the gaps. It's when your brain is unidled that it starts to connect dots, come up with new ideas, or solve problems in ways you didn't expect. This is the opposite of multitasking or grinding through tasks. It's giving your mind the space to daydream, reflect, or simply be. And that's where the magic happens. You're not pressuring yourself to come up with brilliant ideas, they just show up, uninvited, when you least expect it. Think of it like planting seeds. You can't force them to grow by staring at them. You plant them, water them, and then let nature take its course. Your mind works the same way. You feed it with information, experiences, and ideas, but for all that to flourish, you need downtime. Time to let the seeds grow. Here's the kicker, scheduling do-nothing time can feel strange at first. It can make you feel unproductive or even a little restless, especially if you're used to being on the go all the time. But trust the process. You don't need to fill every minute of your day with tasks to be successful. In fact, when you deliberately carve out moments of stillness, you're giving your mind a chance to reset, recharge, and come back stronger. Start small. Schedule 10 or 15 minutes here and there where you can just sit quietly. No phone, no distractions. Let your mind drift. Maybe you'll think about nothing in particular, maybe you'll daydream. Maybe your brain will throw a random idea at you out of nowhere. That's the beauty of it, you never know what's going to pop up when you give yourself permission to let go of the constant grind. Over time, you'll start to notice a difference. That sense of overwhelm? It'll start to fade. Ideas will come more naturally, and you'll feel more energized, not because you've been working harder, but because you've allowed yourself the space to breathe. It's counterintuitive, but sometimes, the best thing you can do to fuel your ambition is to intentionally do nothing at all. So, go ahead. Give your brain the vacation it didn't know it needed. Schedule that do-nothing time, and watch how creativity sneaks up on you when you least expect it. Number 10. Apply the one-touch rule to emails and messages. Let's dive into the world of emails and messages, a place where chaos reigns and stress multiplies with every new notification. We've all been there, the inbox that just keeps filling up, the unread messages stacking up, and suddenly, it's not just a few pings, it's a digital avalanche. So, what's the solution for the ambitious but lazy? Enter the one-touch rule. What's the one-touch rule? It's a mindset shift, really. The idea is simple. Whenever you open an email or message, you handle it right then and there. No opening, skimming, then closing it for later because, let's face it, later turns into days, and then that message becomes a source of guilt and stress. Instead, you make a decision on the spot. You either respond, delete, forward, archive, or file it away for a specific action. But the key is, you don't leave it hanging around, cluttering up your mental space. Here's the thing, when you keep revisiting the same emails or messages over and over without taking action, you're creating a mental loop. Your brain ends up using way more energy than it needs to, just by having to reprocess the same information. It's like watching a movie trailer 15 times without ever watching the actual movie. Pointless, right? The one-touch rule eliminates that energy drain by forcing you to deal with it immediately, so you don't have to keep circling back. Now, this doesn't mean you have to drop everything and write a novel-length reply to every single message as soon as it comes in. That's not what this is about. It's about making a decision. If it needs a response and you can do it in a minute or two, fire it off. Done. If it's something that's going to take more time or thought, the one-touch rule still applies. You just move it to a task list or schedule time to deal with it. But the key here is that it doesn't sit there, staring back at you every time you check your inbox, taunting you with its unfinished status. Think about how much clearer your mind would be if your inbox wasn't this constant, nagging reminder of unfinished business. With the one-touch rule, you're taking control of that. You're not passively letting messages build up into some monstrous to-do list in disguise. You're deciding, then and there, how to handle it. The decision might be quick: archive it, delete it, reply with a quick sentence, but it's a decision, and you're moving on. The sneaky part of email overload is that it can make you feel productive without actually being productive. You're doing something, but nothing's really getting done. You're just pushing things around, leaving loose ends everywhere. The one-touch rule stops this productivity theater in its tracks. It forces you to be decisive, to close loops, and to clear the clutter, mentally and digitally. And here's where the laziness factor comes in. The one-touch rule is great for anyone who leans toward the lazy side because, at its core, it's about efficiency. You're not letting things drag on. and you're certainly not letting small tasks balloon into stressful beasts. You touch it once, handle it, and move on. It's minimal effort for maximum return. Let's be real, most emails and messages don't need to be handled with the level of care we tend to give them. We overthink, we hesitate, we delay. But when you embrace the one-touch rule, you strip all of that away. You simplify. And when things are simple, they're easier. Less stressful. Less of a burden. In the end, the one-touch rule is about freeing yourself. Freeing yourself from the mental clutter of unresolved messages and the endless to-do list that lurks in your inbox. It's about keeping things moving, staying decisive, and not letting small tasks pile up into a mountain. Touch it once, handle it, and keep going. It's a game changer. Being ambitious and lazy isn't a contradiction, it just means you need to find smarter ways to work. So, if you're someone who dreams big but sometimes struggles with getting started, remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Break things down, focus on small wins, and embrace systems that make your life easier. Most importantly, don't beat yourself up. Success isn't about doing everything at once, it's about doing the right things consistently. If you found this helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tips on how to achieve big goals without burning out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.